today we will be talking about the characters in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Already in the earlier lectures, you have come to know what time Chaucer was writing in, what was the age of Chaucer, how there was a transition from medieval to the modern period, and how certain characteristics of both the ages, the medieval times and the modern times, are found in abundance in the writing of Chaucer. So to begin with the prologue, you should know that the Canterbury Tales is set during the time of a pilgrimage, and this pilgrimage is a very sacred practice for the society of the times, because this pilgrimage was made to the shrine of Thomas Becket at Canterbury in England. So the pilgrims who were traveling together, they stay in Tabard Inn, where the host, his name is Harry Bailey, he suggests that each of the travelers, amongst whom is also the poet Chaucer, tell 4 stories to entertain the weary people. Now, 2 stories were to be narrated on the way to the cathedral, and 2 were to be narrated on the way back from the shrine. So the Canterbury Tales is a set of tales all narrated on the way of shrine. So what is missing in these tales is the tales or the stories from the travelers on their way back from the shrine. And the reason being, probably Chaucer himself, was no more. He passed away before the writing of those tales. So the tales are set on a very realistic tone, and they are reported by Chaucer, who claims that he has exactly repeated what the story was like, what he had heard from those characters which we are going to talk about today. So the entire collection of the stories or the tales in the Canterbury Tales is meant to survey humanity at large, the humanity as a whole. And this prologue is a form of a dream vision. It begins with a chant and a welcome to the spring season. Now we all know that spring season rejuvenates nature. It not only rejuvenates nature, but it also rejuvenates man, and it induces in him a longing for a spiritual rebirth. So March is a month, which is a very dry month, and April onwards the spring sets in that part of the globe, that is England. So that was the time when pilgrims thought of a spiritual harmony and wanted to express their gratitude to the Saint Thomas Becket, also known as the Holy Happy Martyr. And he had, because he had sacrificed his life and he had saved people from their suffering, their sickness. Therefore, as a mark of gratitude, the pilgrims usually visited the St. Thomas Becket's shrine during the springtime. So at the very outset, we get to know that there are different social groups who have gathered in the inn, and they are going to undertake the journey to the shrine. So the prologue is like a social document and a picture gallery which presents a microcosm of the 14th century English society. The panorama of lives presented by Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales belongs not only to the highest class but also to the lowest rung of English society. Broadly speaking, the characters in the prologue can be categorized into 3 categories: the religious ecclesiastical, which includes nun, monk, friar, franklin; the secular characters like knight, squire, yeoman, merchant; and the ideal characters like clerk, parson, and even the plowman. Now, he believed that knighthood protected humanity. Whatever the knights did was for justice, to protect the lives and property of people. And the clergy fostered certain thoughts and practices which were to purify the human soul and hence the human beings. And as far as the plowman is concerned, he was a worker person working with his hands, and he was providing food to humanity, to human beings. So you will find that this prologue is characterized by two different styles of writing, right? So on one hand side, he is going to venerate this class of knights, clergy and plowmen, and on the other hand is a class, the merchant, the cook, and certain other sergeant of law and municipal reeve and other characters, which he will be talking about in a very sarcastic or a satirical manner. Madame Eglantine, right? We will know more about her in a few minutes. So by now you know that there are a total of 30 characters, 29, and the 30th one is the host. Amongst the 29, you also have the poet, who is the narrator, observer. And who's the poet? Very right, Geoffrey Chaucer. And what's the name of the host? Harry Bailey. So the prologue begins with, I told you, a chant that is welcoming the spring. I'm just going to read a few lines from the beginning of the book. When that April with his shores suit the drought of March hath pursued to the root, and bathed every vein in switch liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. When Zephyrus, eke with his sweet breath, inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender crops, and the young sun hath in the rum his half course vion, and small fowls maken melody that sleepen all the night with open eye. So pricketh them nature in his courage than longer folk to goon on pilgrimages, and palmers for to seek strange straws to fern hawks knoweth in sundry lawns, and specially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they went, the holy blissful martyr for to seek that them hath holpen when they were sick. Now, why did I read this? And if you were reading with me, you will come across very strange spellings, and don't get surprised. Why? Because this is English of the medieval times, and the spelling, for example, the prologue is beginning with when, and what is spelled out is something, which you, if you did it in today's time, the teacher is going to put a cross and say that this is wrong. How do you spell when today? It's like this. But how has Chaucer spelled it? Like this. So that was even the spellings of April. So this is something which you will study in your next semester, the semantics and the changes that have taken place, the diachronic and the synchronic changes which have taken place in the English language. So every word, see, even the word sweet is written this way, S-W-E-T-E. And how do you write it today? It's like this. So though, this is written definitely as per the rules and as per the language prevalent at that time, I think you can make sense of this if you read it on your own. So it will be better, if you finish your reading prior to listening to this lecture. When April, now I'm just going to speak out in simple words what Chaucer is trying to tell us. He's trying to tell us that when April with its sweet showers has pierced to the root of the dryness of the month of March and bathed every vein, every flora and fauna with the quickening power, the flower is born. and that's the springtime. Whence they fire, again a flower, with its sweet breath has quickened the tender new shoots in every area. The young sun has run half a course. The birds are opening their eyes, making melody. Nature is pricking them to heart. Whom? The human beings. People long to go to the pilgrimage to the renowned shrine of St. Thomas Becket. And why do they go there? He tells, to seek the blessings of the holy martyr who had helped them when they were sick. So you could be asked a question like this: why is the pilgrimage to St. Becket's shrine undertaken by the society of that time? So there is the answer to it. He goes on further to describe how a set of pilgrims have now gathered in the Tabard Inn, and they have to undertake this pilgrimage, and there are 29 sundry folk. This is what he writes: well, 29 in a company of sundry folk, by adventure ye fall in fellowship. So it's by chance that they are into a fellowship. They did not plan together. So they are just getting together where? At the Tabard Inn. And they have to ride to Canterbury. And so it is decided, as I have already told you, the host suggests them to narrate a tale, right? And there are certain characters, and randomly, someone is chosen, and it is the knight who's to speak first. So I told you earlier, Chaucer holds the knight in high esteem because of the chivalry, the truthfulness that he is fighting with in the pagan lands, and he is winning a number of battles. And in doing so, what is he doing? He shows his valiance, his courage, and also his love for the fellow beings whom he is protecting from others by protecting their lives and property. So briefly, he has been fighting 15 battles and had thrice fought for faith in the lists of chessmen, and even slain his foe. So he is a brave knight, and he is also renowned. So he probably is going to the shrine he has set for this pilgrimage after succeeding in these battles. The next person is Squire. So the Squire is quite enthusiastic. He is young and he is the son of the knight. So he is hot-blooded, passionate, and has also made a number of accomplishments, and he epitomizes the youth of that time, right? So he, whatever the kind of young person would be in the 14th century, he is symbolizing the young people of the age. So he is the representative of youth. The yeoman again is the one who is there, and he is carrying a bow and an arrow. He has a sword, also shows that he also belongs to that kind of a chivalric group of society. And earlier, what he's carrying a horn and another things. He was a woodman earlier. The prioress is quite smiling, and she is named Madame Eglantine. So what do you expect from a prioress? You might be thinking that the prioress might be very religious and must be having so many other mannerisms about her because she is associated with the religious group. But she sang in divine service beautifully through her intoned nose. At times, people have a tendency of speaking through their nose. And look at the manner in which Chaucer is trying to present this character. not only by describing what she's doing, but also a special quality that is associated to the pitch and tone or the manner in which she is singing the divine songs. She spoke French well after the manner of Stratford-le-Bon, and whereas she was unfamiliar to the Parisian French. She was also taught well, and she had the art of eating the food, every morsel, in such a proper manner that she would not let the morsel fall from her lips, and also that she would not soak her hands into the sauce or curry and make a mess out of it. So she took great pleasure in being courteous. She wiped her upper lip so cleanly that no film of grease was to be seen in her cup after she had taken the last draught of whatever coffee or milk she was consuming. She reached her food with great seemliness, and surely she was a very pleasant and amiable personality. So she was, what was she? You would be asked to write a character sketch of Madame Eglantine. So she was very pleasant in her attitude, and she was very amiable. What do you mean by amiable? Amiable means friendly. So this, you must mark, is one of the important characters in the prologue. And also it brings before us the manner in which women, something about how women were being portrayed in those days. Right, we move on to the next character, and the next character, again, I hope you would be able to write more about her, because you need to exactly read out what has been written. She took pains to imitate the court manners. She was stately in her demeanor, and she was regarded worthy of reverence. But to speak of her sensibility, says Chaucer, she was so charitable and compassionate that she would weep if she saw a mouse being trapped, if it were dead or bleeding. So she had some small hounds whom she fed with roasted meat, milk, bread, and fine flour, and would weep bitterly if any one of these were dead. Now look at the sensitivity level of Madame Eglantine. Her wimple, which is the headdress, was also plaited very neatly. Her nose was long, well proportioned, her eyes grey as glass. So look at the similes Chaucer is using. Her mouth was small, soft, and red besides. She had a fine forehead. It was broad, and her cloak was neat. About her arm she carried a rosary of small coral beads, and the larger beads all being green, and she used to wear a brooch of gold on which was engraved Amor vincit omnia, which means love conquers all things. So whatever Chaucer is writing about the prioress, so she was wearing a brooch on which it was engraved Amor vincit omnia. And what does that mean? Love conquers all. So he has described the prioress, her physical appearance, her manners, her sensitivity level. Now look how many shades of the personality of the prioress Chaucer has touched. Similarly, he has a few things to say about the monk. Now the monk was not very devout, right? So the monk was excellent one, and what did he like? He just loved hunting. So Chaucer is trying to portray this monk after a person named Dane Piers. The name of the person is Dane Piers. whom, so it's like a realistic portrayal of the characters. So there is a real life character after which he is fashioning this character. So what was the name of the character after which this monk is being portrayed? Someone Dane Pyers in real life, who was a person with a lot of love for creature comforts, and he had a horse with bells and things like that. So this monk, again, you know, is not a person who was actually committed to some kind of a cause. He was a person who loved his own ways. He loved all the comfortable ways. His boots were soft. His horse was in fine condition. He was not pale or did not look like a ghost. Why? Because he fed himself with any kind of roasted meat and the best of swans. So his palfrey, which is his horse, riding horse, was as brown as berry. So that's a satirical portrait of the monk. So this is quite unconventional, because the picture of the monk also now corresponds with the vices that were creeping in the monastic order. So he has truly voiced and portrayed this character of monk in that manner. Next is the friar. So the friar, he considers him to be the most exemplary individualized portraits. He is typical. Friar again is fashioned after a character called Hubert in real life, and the friar went from place to place and he lived on alms. He was very clever. In all of the 4 monastic orders, there was none like him, and he was very clever in his use of words. By the power of his words, the manner of his speech, he could seduce, or he could, convince people. So he was a strong pillar for his profession, and he was familiar with all sorts of say officers or ranks and files around him. He heard confessions very sweetly, and his absolution was pleasant. He was an easy man, enjoining penances when he looked to have a good allowance. Now this friar probably was very greedy, and he heard the confessions, and he used to, he was a gyp talker, good at singing, and he would be doing anything and everything. And also he is revealing that section of society that has fallen prey to wrong practices, wrong ways, or the evil ways of earning money. So this particular character greatly shows us how evil practices were creeping, how vices were creeping into the monastic order. Next is the merchant. Again, he says he would say anything pompously. He would harp on what he was saying in order to gain his things, and he was not legal in his practices. So that's what he has to say about the merchant. The clerk was a person who loved knowledge, and anyone, you know, who was giving him some kind of knowledge, he would be quite respectful, and he blessed all those who helped him in gaining his knowledge. So the clerk is like an ideal scholar, again about whom Chaucer is highly talking about. So this person is an ideal scholar. His quest for knowledge is quite persistent, and he was so fond of reading that he had around 20 books which were bound in black and red. He read Aristotle's philosophy rather than having rich robes or fiddles or a harp. So he was a philosopher, and he had little gold in his coffers, which means almost negligible or nothing. Whatever he might receive from his friends, he would spend it on buying books and learning things, earnestly praying for the souls of those who made it possible for him to read those books or buy those books. Then we have guildsmen, and these are a set of haberdasher, carpenter, weaver, dyer, upholster, and you see how Chaucer has brought before us the commoners in the picture gallery of the Prologue to the Canterbury Tales, and they again, exemplified great brotherhood. So their gears were fresh, newly trimmed. Their knives were tipped not with brass but with fine wrought silver, also their girdles and their pouches. So something again striking about these guildsmen is that they were quite well to do, right? So the next is the cook, and the cook again is a person about whom Chaucer says that he was not, though he might be good in cooking, but he was a man with a very bad hygiene, right? He did not keep himself clean. He could roast and boil, broil, fry, prepare soups and bake pies, but he was unhygienic himself. Again, if you remember, in the previous lectures, I talked about the Black Death and the plague that struck England. And why did it? Because the pestilence that happened was because of the conventional, religious, outdated thoughts, unscientific thoughts, and the unhygienic habits of the generation. So that is about the cook. Now, the shipman. The shipman, again, he was dwelling far in the west, and he was from Dartmouth. He rode upon a big, strong horse, and he knew how to, manage his clothes and things like that. Around his neck, under his arm, he had a dagger hanging on a lace. On hot summers, that made his complexion all brown. He was a good fellow. Many a draught of wine had he drawn on the way from Bordeaux while merchants slept. He paid little regard to the scrupulous conscience. If he fought and had an upper hand, he then sent those he fought with, home to every water and every land, but all for his skill in reckoning the time of tides, the currents, and the dangers at hand, his harbour and his moons. There was none like him from the Hull to Carthage. So that's about the shipman. The doctor of physic again is a very interesting character in the prologue. He is a learned man. He knows astronomy, he knows astrology as well, and he used to club astrology and astronomy together to tell the patients, what they were suffering from, because it was usually believed in those times that there were 4 elements: fire, earth, water, and air, and there were 4 types of characters: melancholic, who had the earth element heavy in them; choleric, who were fiery, hot, and dry, associated with air; sanguine, associated with air, hot and moist. Then there were phlegmatic personalities, cold, moist, watery, with the water element dominant in them. So how many types of characters? The melancholic, choleric, sanguine, and the phlegmatic. You would need to remember these. Why? Because in the Renaissance drama or other dramas and novels, you will come across certain characters who will be described in this manner. So we move on to the wife of Bath. Now the wife of Bath again has a special thing about her, that she was little deaf, and she had great skill in cloth making, and nobody could surpass her skill. There was no woman, who could have taken precedence. If any did, be sure she was so angry that she was out of all her charity. So, in spite of her shady life, her self assertiveness, she has made herself an esteemed and a respected member in the neighborhood. So, she had been thrice to Jerusalem, and many a foreign stream she had crossed, and to tell the truth, she was gap toothed. So, again, if you remember, while describing the earlier character, the nasal tone with which she sung the prioress, had Chaucer pointed out, and now this time he's talking about the gap in her teeth. She sat comfortably on an ambling horse, wearing a fair wimple, which means a headdress, and hat on her head as broad as a buckler or a target about her. So that's all about her, and the way she has been portrayed by Chaucer. The parson was a good man of religion, but he was rich in holy thoughts and work. He was also a learned man and a clerk who would faithfully preach the gospel of Christ. His parishioners, he would instruct them in a very devout manner. His parish was wide and there was a lot of area under him. He did not forget to visit even the farthest end of the parish, wherever there was sickness, misfortune, or anything, wherever he was required, he just was there. So this noble example he gave to his sheep, that he practiced and then he taught. So these were the words, which he took out of the gospel and added this simile to it, that if gold rust, what shall iron do? So we come to know what kind of rust he's talking about. He's talking about the rust of corruption in the religious circles, which was defiling all these characters. We already have seen what the friar or what the monk was doing. So a priest should, he believed a priest should set an example by his purity, how his sheep should live. So, and that is a comparison which again Chaucer is taking from the religious scriptures about the sheep and the shepherd, right? So the next character that we are going to talk about is the plowman. And plowman, I told you, holds in high esteem because he is the one who is working with a great dignity of labor. He loved God and he believed that God was with him in his good and bad fortune. He would thresh, dig, make ditches, and all he did was in the name of Christ, for the sake of every poor parson, without giving a thought, that this person is poor. He's sowing things for everyone. He's trying to bring out the maximum from the yield from the fields. He paid his steeds fully and regularly, both on to his produce and his goods. He again, then he describes the manner in which he is dressing up. We have the miller then, and what does Chaucer say about the miller? The miller is a stout person. He is again a dishonest man. He belongs to the ugly characters that have been portrayed in the prologue. He was broad-shouldered, short, thick, and a naughty fellow, and there was no door in which he could have off its hinge or break. So he was a fat fellow. Wherever he went, he just broke off the hinges of the doors. The municipal or the butler he was a butler in the Inn of Court, and whether he paid in cash or took on credit, he always was watchful about his buying. So we have again the sergeant of law that Chaucer is talking about, and also he's bringing before us these characters who probably are practicing law, but what kind of society that they are living in and the kind of practices that were prevalent there. Again, he is trying to question the practices prevalent. So The reeve. The reeve again is a slender choleric man with a beard and a shaved hair, cropped hair around his ears. Again, this is the description. I'm just going to read it. His beard was shaved as nigh as ever he can. His hair was by his ears full roundly shorn. His top was docked like a priest before. Full long were his legs, and full long a staff. There was no calf ye seen. So he's elaborately describing the physical appearance of the reeve, and again he could buy lands better than his lords, for he had stored for himself, he had amassed wealth in a secret manner. So again, this shows the cunning nature of human beings of that time. He had learned a good trade, and he was a very good workman and a carpenter. He sat upon his fine stallion, his horse, which was dable grey. He had a long upper coat of blue, and he carried on his side an old sword. The reeve of whom I speak, says Chaucer, was from Norfolk, from near a town they call Balswell. His coat was tucked up around like a friar's, and he ever rode the hindmost of our company. So he was quite far behind. The summoner. Now the summoner is also one of the characters about which the physical appearance of the summoner is being described, and his habits. He loved garlic and onions and leeks, and he drank strong wine, as red as blood. So again we see how vices are creeping into the society, and soul is not the concern of these kind of characters, but satisfying their bodily needs is what they want. The pardoner. So the pardoner again, had a hair as yellow as wax, and it hung smoothly like a hank of flax. This is what he observes. His locks hung in thin strands. He feigned flattery and tricks, and he made the person an other person. He duped, he deceived the people. He could read well a lesson and a story, but best of all he sang an offertory. So you see the shades of characters that he's talking about. Last of all, we have the pardoner, the host himself, the host Hailey. So again, this person had a taste for good things, and we know what had he offered the pilgrims. He said that whosoever narrates a tale which is the best will win a free supper or a free meal from his side. So he is entertaining himself, or he is also trying to entertain others. So I hope by now you are familiar with all the characters of the prologue. You should go through the study material that is provided, and we will talk about the themes and take up some analysis of the prologue in the next lecture. Thank you very much.